Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wow 11. I'm Paige Hattie, the director of Movius Connect, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Is IIoT really the future of condition monitoring? Presented by Ed Spence and David Howard. So, guys, we're super excited for your presentation today. We're really happy to have you here. Before I pass things over to David and Ed, I just wanted to let our audience here today know that you'll be receiving a certificate of attendance for tuning into today's webinar shortly after the webinar is completed. And also, if you guys have any questions throughout the webinar here today, I know David and Ed have a jam-packed session for us. So if we have time at the end, we'll answer a few questions. If not, your questions will be shared with the guys and they'll come back to you after the fact with your answers. But feel free to submit any questions for David and Ed throughout today's presentation in the question panel. And again, we'll be sure to get your questions answered for you. So that being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and pass things on over to you.
Welcome to the first of what we hope will be a series of interviews of thought leaders in the space of condition monitoring, in particular, new instrumentation, IoT, and wireless sensors. You can't go to a conference today without seeing many of the vendors out there. It's a complicated technology in space, and we decided that it would be a good idea to have some conversations about where this industry has been and where it's going. And we're going to kick off this inaugural session with M. David Howard. Good morning, David. Great to see you. I've known
You as
David for a
well.
number of years since I was researching this space, and he was looking at technologies for his products. He's a leader, or Besta is the leader in balancing machines and portable analyzers. And the first thing I thought I'd ask you, David, is a means to getting towards the future. Let's review some of the past a little bit. How did we get to where we are? How did you get to where you are? And some of the decisions you made along the way. So you
Yeah,
came out of
so
that hardware position, but what drove you into the IoT space, decided to plow into IoT as you have?
well, I think the big thing is that IoT has been deployed within our daily lives for so many years. I've been an early adopter of technology almost, to a fault. I was a Windows Phone guy. I was a laser disc player guy. So, I mean, these are the types of things that, you have to adopt it, try it to see if it's going to work. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Well, with IoT, in our daily lives, things like Apple Watches, Ring video doorbells, all of these other devices had become so dominant in our daily life. We saw the writing on the wall and said, this is the future of condition monitoring in many ways. Is it the end all be all? Will it replace the traditional route-based data collection and wired accelerometers? No. But is it a wonderful new tool in the toolbox to optimize resources to be able to achieve more with less? And that's really what drove us to get into the IoT business is, like Dr. Airbest has said many times, when we started this company, it was to make vibration analysis and condition monitoring easy and affordable. And having been practitioners for so long, that was our focus, making it easy and affordable and easy to deploy. So that's what drove us to get there, and that's why we're here today.
Okay. Excuse me. Excuse me. In terms of your strategy for the market, David, did you see a particular target customer market application when you launched? And, how would you profile that user? And has that profile changed for you over the last 5 or 6 years since we've been talking?
Well, I'd say that, an old colleague of mine used to talk about the underserved market. John Cochran, he was our chief operating officer at Comtest when I was the director of engineering and customer success at Comtest. And I truly believe that is such a true statement within our industry because, the traditional players within the route-based and online condition monitoring space are the big guys, the General Electrics and the Rockwell Automations and things like that. And, they have a very very good product, very expensive product in many cases. So the underserved market, those mid-cap companies, municipal governments, hospitals, educational institutions, many of those don't have the resources to purchase those types of systems and devices. So, we focused on that, and that focus remains consistent throughout our business. But as a result of that focus, it's also brought a number of very large customers to the table that, Fortune 50 customers that are global organizations and leaders in their own space. So, we're continuing to focus on that mid cap market and delivering the best value we can for that market, and that's proliferating into other opportunities with much larger organizations.
That's interesting. So if you were a car line, you're not a Mercedes, but you're not a Corolla either.
Yeah.
You're someplace mid-brand, or where would you?
Well, I would say that we are, from a cost perspective, we are the equivalent of, like, the typical mid, cost vehicle. We're not a Mercedes, we're not a Toyota, maybe we're a bit of a Lexus in many ways, because from a functionality and technical capability perspective, it's difficult to find hardware that can meet or exceed what we've been able to achieve, especially with our new Gen 2 gateway and Gen 3 sensors. But our pricing is that of a very fair and equitable pricing structure based on, value and volume. So really, at the end of the day, it's Lexus technology with the Toyota price.
Wow, I like that. I was really impressed since we first started talking. I think we met at a Vibration Institute
Mhm.
uh, show floor when I had first started to hang out my shingle to get into this market. And since then, your product line has just exploded. I'm going to throw up a slide here that I put together that just shows some of the breadth of the products that you bring to the market today. Uh, what drove what drove the evolution of all of these options? So this is well beyond IoT for vibration monitoring for the to aid the specialist in his work. You can do a lot more with this. Can you walk us through what the strategy was to, you know,
So yeah, I mean, almost 6 years ago, when we designed the original Phantom, the one I have here in my hand,
mhm.
we sat down as a company, as a leadership team and technical team, and said, what is it that we want to achieve here? There's 1,000. I don't know what the number is, Ed. You probably know better than I do, but there's hundreds of wireless accelerometer companies out there, and we didn't just want to be noise. When you think about true asset reliability management and practicing what you preach, it comes down to much more than just vibration. Vibration's one technology. It's a great technology. However, there's other process variables like 4 to 20 milliamp outputs from existing sensors like level transmitters, pressure transmitters, flow transmitters. Infrared thermography can be applied. Lots of customers already have wired accelerometers to a switch box that can be incorporated into this. So when we really went into the market, we went into the market trying to create an entire ecosystem of sensors that would allow the user or the reliability engineer, the process engineer, to not just look at vibration in a bit of a vacuum, if you will, but rather look at all of the other variables, or have the opportunity to look at those other variables, so that they can do correlational analysis and linear regression testing and things like that to see if, when this happens, if it correlates to this activity or this action. So that's why we took that approach, and it's been very successful for us.
Have you attracted interest from some of the traditional industrial sensor vendors to partner, collaborate, work with you in that regard to um,
We've had very good conversations with a number of the traditional sensor manufacturers, and we collaborate regularly with them. You know, Gil and Poseidon, we've had discussions with for oil condition monitoring. We obviously are already working within the thermocouple space and ultrasound sensors for contact with our GP modules. So we've had a number of good positive discussions with many of the traditional hardware manufacturers, including Hansford Sensors. The team at Hansford has been very very receptive to working with us, and it's been a great partnership.
Oh, that's great. I know Chris Hansford. I've known him for many years as well, and as a leader in the space, it's great to hear that they're looking at some of the new technology and how they might participate in that.
Yeah, it's more integration of the two in that regard. You know, I mean, we look at it very differently. Chris, I don't want to speak for Chris, but Chris and I have had the discussion where, like, wireless will never replace wired, and wired will never replace wireless. They need
Mhm.
to exist and coexist together, because that's what the customers need. The customers need some things to be wired, and they'd like some things to be wireless. Maybe the critical assets are wired, and some of the non-critical but still important assets or processes are wireless. Or maybe the even critical assets are wireless in the case of where there's a safety hazard or things. So it's about collaboration based on coexistence rather than competition.
Right, right. Interesting. So your company came out of this space. You were already out in the field selling the balancing equipment. You were doing the route-based equipment and services. Um, but as you're aware, everybody's aware, there's been a number of companies. They've come out of the woodwork. It seems like every other week or so, I'm catching wind of a new vendor in the space that decides that condition monitoring looks like an attractive place to be. And a lot of these vendors have, I'm going to show up another slide here, have a lot of experience with IoT and dashboards and seem to be software oriented, but maybe not so much from a vibration point of view. We had a client last year, sorry, approach us. They just couldn't get their sensor uh, they couldn't get the bandwidth they hoped to get out of their sensor response. And it was due to a mechanical design
Sure.
issues, which we offered to redo for them. So what do you say about, um, you know, these new entrants to the market? You
I,
guys have done a better job, apparently, at designing your bill of materials and designing your form factor to perform. I know that you've told me you're using a high frequency sensor in there, so the mechanics have to be there. Do you want to comment on that in terms of your approach to this, the expertise and competencies you guys are bringing to this, and how that might differentiate from some of these IoT companies coming out of the woodwork now?
I think that, not to talk ill of any competitor or anyone else trying to, enter
Sure.
the space or that has already successfully entered the space. I think it really just comes down to um, a number of things. There's a lot of people that understand signal processing, but they don't understand vibration. So I've seen software that's very good signal processing software, but it's very bad vibration analysis software. So, is there a proliferation of others out there that are doing things that I don't necessarily understand why or how they're doing it? Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of claims of, fully automated artificial intelligence and fully automated machine learning, but zero case studies presented, zero peer reviewed papers presented, at any, peer review conference. It's it's interesting to me. So I think what makes us uniquely different is, as a company, 90% of the people on staff came out of the field. So, our team has been vibration analysts. We have been reliability engineers. We have been maintenance managers. We have been plant managers. plant engineers, and so on. So that gives us a unique insight into what actually the customer needs, because we've actually walked a mile in those shoes rather than sitting behind a desk and I'm not saying this is happening, but just, being a bunch of programmers thinking, well, let's build this beautiful dashboard and connect it to this sensor, and boy, we're going to sell millions of these things. We put a lot of thought into it to make sure that, even the simplest things like the user interface and the tools available are useful to the reliability engineer, the maintenance manager, the plant manager. And there's different sets of tools depending on, who's looking at the data. So I think that's what has made us uniquely different, is the fact that we're practitioners first, and then hardware and software designers second.
Yeah, when I first started talking about IoT in this space, it was clear there were two big categories of vendors there. There were those that had come from this background, who are even still who are adding IoT to their existing PDM services.
Yep.
And then there were, IoT oriented vendors who were coming in and trying to figure this out. They were hiring a Cat 3 or even a Cat 4 to help them get this thing off the ground, but they were different, very different background.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I've seen pretty much the same thing, and nothing's more frustrating than, you know, you don't want to ever be in a position where you're talking to a customer and they're like, well, what do you think about this? Because I think that, it's a free market, it's a global enterprise, and I don't have any goal or objective to downplay anyone else's efforts. I can only highlight the positives that we bring to the table and let the customer then, make the decision based on the information provided to them.
yeah, and I agree with you. And it wouldn't be our intention, even with this series, not to give anybody a fair shake. Anybody wanted to present or have this kind of a conversation, be happy to line them up for a future conversation. On the other
Absolutely.
hand, one of the things I talk about a lot in public is that there is a certain amount of caveat emptor here. There's the looking at the specs, looking at the sensors integrated under the hood of these things, looking at the way they approach the signal processing or the dashboard. We want this industry to move forward. I think we all want that to move forward.
Agree.
Plenty of room out there. You might agree with me. I don't know what you think about the penetration of the overall market, but I did some work last year for a private equity outfit that was kicking the tires, talking to a vendor. When I interviewed the C-suite there, they were talking about this is just a land grab. There's so much room to run out there, um, that it's get your stuff out there and service customers the best way you can. We all want to see that happen. So, but we don't want to see the industry get a black eye if systems are deployed that don't seem to be, working as advertised,
I
right?
agree
And
completely.
yeah,
It's interesting. There's in terms of market capacity, I mean, we're just barely scratching the surface. And as technology continues to evolve, and we become more efficient in semiconductor manufacturing, and we can reduce costs by becoming more efficient, or new innovative designs and things like that, it's only going to drive the cost of these devices and this technology down, so that it's even more affordable and even more deployable. And quite frankly, I don't see any reason why in another 10 years 80% of the assets that could be monitored for condition monitoring are monitored using an IoT type device. The walk around device, if you think about it, those are great tools. And heck, the first vibration analyzer I used was a 2115. And well, before that it was an IRD 885, I think. But nonetheless, the point being is that you have this amazing opportunity to really capitalize on, if we're able to get there and everyone build good quality products that deliver on what they're supposed to deliver on. and we won't end up having a bunch of gun shy folks worried about whether they're going to get burnt again, but because they didn't make an informed decision, or they made a poor decision when they first deployed IoT as an early adopter, or things like that. And then think about it, when you deploy IoT and you have 80% of the assets that could be monitored with condition monitoring now covered with IoT sensors, what could you do with those additional resources? The vibe guy that was going out there and doing routes, well, maybe now he becomes a planner. Maybe now he's able to work on special capital projects as well. I mean, it's not meant to replace people. It's meant to make things more efficient.
Are you finding that that's the case when you talk to maintenance people? I mean, I agree. One would think that this is a tool in the toolkit. You gets you out of the mundane part of running around and collecting the data, doing the fun part. I did a bunch of work in the field measuring the power consumption or the charge consumption of some wireless sensors. And
Yep,
sitting out in a soccer field in a sunny day, collecting the data isn't all that much fun. It's getting back to your desk and analyzing all the data. I
sure.
find more fun too. So, are you finding that fear or that reticence on the part of the traditional vibration analysts is starting to be overcome? I talk to a lot of guys that are saying, "Yeah, I want to adopt some of this technology in my plant." And what do you think now? Has the wind shifted in terms of willingness
Yeah.
to look at this technology? I mean, it's complicated, but still a willingness to look at it.
Well, I think what I'm seeing, and I mean, just recently, I was in Ohio and I met with some very seasoned, very experienced, long standing vibration analysts and professionals, and they see it uh, as a tool to help make things more efficient.
Mhm.
But 5 years ago, maybe even less,
Mhm.
that was likely not the opinion, because the business model was route-based analysis, and let's go out there and bill by the day for route-based analysis and reporting, and all these other things. But what's starting to happen is, with IoT starting to be deployed, especially in some of these other customers or these other big companies, what's happening is the service provider that's done routes for forever is now seeing that the company, their client, is interested in IoT. So they're coming on board to augment that and support that in any way that they can, whether it's through installation, whether it's through installation and analysis, any number of things. So I think that the days of people being afraid of the technology eliminating someone's job are over, because the technology's been proven, and it's been deployed and used so widely for the past 5 or 6 years that most everyone's become familiar with it, whether it's in their personal lives or professionally.
Right, right. What other obstacles or headwinds do you see to the adoption? I sponsored a poll 2 years ago with the CBM, Mobius Connect. We got about 1,000 people responded. A lot of good reasons for, their reticence to kick the tires, some IoT technologies. What do you see? What are the most common? If you had to do a Pareto of the reasons people say, I'm just not ready for this. What kind of pushback do you get from the marketplace?
It's not so much pushback as much as it's um, more of a, what's the right way of saying it? More of a due diligence, and a very strong due diligence. When you're talking about IoT, and wireless asset health management and asset reliability management, and sensor technology, I mean, you start thinking about, there's a lot of sensitive information that's being transferred,
Hmm.
machine status, energy consumption, all of these things that,
Hmm.
um, could have value to perhaps a competitor in some form of industrial espionage.
Yeah.
So the pushback more is on the security side, which is why as a company, we focused very strongly on that to pursue ISO 27001 certification and to pursue FIPS compliance and to use, dedicated crypto cell processors our between our devices to ensure everything is secure at rest, in transit. It security is a really important thing, and I think that that's one that is most often overlooked by many of the newer entrants, I would say.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I agree. If you go to an IoT conference, that's almost all they talk about is the
Yeah.
data security, right? As
Yep.
I'm sure you've seen.
But then the vibration folks don't really think about that. The reliability engineer doesn't really think about that. But who does think about that is the IT department. So, going through all the necessary steps to make sure that you have your ducks in a row and you can stand behind your information security program and policies, puts you in a much stronger position.
Yeah. Do you find IT getting involved earlier and earlier in the project for that reason? And what role do they play? Do they become the real driver in the end, or the decision maker of adoption? I mean, you hear a lot of horror stories about, getting IT involved, and a lot of vendors provide a cellular backhaul for that reason. Let's do an end run around the whole problem rather than
Yeah.
ask them to put some Ethernet bridges in and let us connect to the local area network.
Well, I think that it comes down to the system architecture and having an educated discussion. 95+% of the time that we have a conversation with IT and explain our system architecture and explain our um, security tools that are in place, and the certifications and the procedures and policies and everything else. I mean, I'm the CEO of the company. I can't access just anyone's database. I can't look at just anyone's data. The customer has to give me access to that data. I can't even
Mm,
ask my database administration team to give me access to the data because that is inappropriate and does not follow our ISO 27001 procedure. So at the end of the day, um, I think that IT has been earlier involved, but more as a collaborative resource than a toll gate of any kind. Yeah, there's a lot of questions, and they all, it's due diligence, and then once the due diligence is over, they're ready to rock and roll.
that makes perfect sense. Kind of adjacent to that subject, sort of the OT, IT, and that transition between them. I'm gonna put up another slide. I mean, I hate using the word AI these days because it's such an overused buzzword.
It's such a great marketing buzzword that it probably
Yeah,
sells lots of stuff for a lot of people.
yeah. And what does it really mean? Um, but there is this sense that it seems to be coupled with the discussion of IoT because you're getting all this data, now much more data and much more access to it. It's stored someplace now on an on-premise server or in the cloud, AWS or whatever.
Yep.
And why can't we collect, as we showed earlier, you've got sensors that connect into your hub. You can get a lot of the data in the same place. Now, isn't there the prospects, the hope now of so much more data available that we can do something intelligent with it?
Well, yeah, but I think that we're still, I mean, even with some of the smartest data scientists in the world, um, you know, some of our customers are, tier one defense contractors and, the national laboratory system and things like that. I mean, we're talking about some of the smartest data scientists in the world. And it's such a large amount of data that, you have to train these models, you have to validate the models. There's there's a lot of work to be done before anybody, I think, can claim any kind of fully automated or fully automated artificial intelligence or machine learning. Again, I've not seen very many case studies, peer review papers. I've seen a lot of marketing, which is great, but I haven't seen under the covers, so to speak. So we take a very different approach. Our approach is, we believe in reinforced and supervised machine learning, where the actual analyst or the engineer is looking at the data and saying, okay, well, yes, this does in fact show me what I wanted to see, and the fault is identified, and then that model is reinforced and supervised by that engineer or technician or analyst. Now, fully automated, I don't see how it can work yet, because if you have a Gould's 3196 pump sitting at a factory here in Glens Falls, New York, pumping water at Finch Paper, and then you have the same exact pump, same exact motor installed at a paper mill in Georgia, as an example, performing the same function. It comes down to how it was installed, how it was commissioned, how it was maintained, how it's operated, the specific gravity of the fluid, environmental factors like humidity. There's so many different variables that, yes, the math, the bearing fault frequencies, the blade pass frequencies, all the mathematical things are going to hold standard. But to go beyond that and say that these two machines of the same exact type in two different places, you can apply the same model to them, is just inappropriate and irresponsible. So that's where, we believe in the supervised reinforced approach, where the analyst builds the model and the analyst trains the model, and the analyst then, validates the model, and they can revalidate and retrain. And that's where I'm at with AI in general. I think it's a great thing, but it's in its infancy. And until such time as we start seeing actual case studies presented in peer review format, I'm really not willing to subscribe to the idea that AI is the answer to everything.
Well, and your operations or maintenance manager probably isn't either. Have you ever met anybody that would take a red light from the machine, from a dashboard, and say, oh, I have to shut down number 3 pump and take it offline? He wants to look somebody in the eye, right? A maintenance
Yeah,
manager, and say, do I really have to do this? Can we get a couple more weeks out of it? Can I wait till that uh,
outage or whatever.
outage? Yeah.
Yeah, those days of fully automated, you know, uh, fully diagnosed machine faults. I do believe it. The potential is there. I do believe that it will happen. I don't know when. I don't know if it's going to be the next 10 years, but I think that we're going to see a huge shift in that form of technology over the course of the next 10 years. And that's going to include things like government regulation. Unfortunately, I mean, we're already seeing it, the government regulation that's being talked about regarding AI.
Right, right. Yeah, I have to agree. My early exposure to this, working with a data science collaborator, a data engineering company collaborator, was, strictly speaking, I suppose the purists wouldn't call it supervised machine learning, but somebody had to be looking at that data and assigning some physical meaning to it. So that's an outlier, or this is what this means. Yes, we can use this feature in the data that you, Mr. Data Engineer, have discovered as a potential indicator. And the value at that time for one project we worked on was expanding the fault coverage. So
Yeah,
it wasn't on doing a better job or automating or filtering the existing faults. It was being able to identify or come up with an indicator for something we hadn't been looking at
yeah,
before with available
yeah.
data. And that seems to
Well,
me that's one place at least for it to
and
show
and
some real value.
and what I have seen that I think is interesting is not really AI as much as it's statistical analysis.
Hmm.
What's normal and what's not. This
Hmm.
this is normal behavior, this is abnormal behavior. That those two things, two variables, can be easily identified just through confidence interval testing and things like that. And then correlation between two events can also be statistically and easily tested. Those are types of things that I think are where all of this big data is going to provide useful information, because you're going to be able to identify statistically positive correlations or negative correlations, as well as normal and abnormal data. Because, with a rolling element bearing, abnormal data may be asynchronous energy, and that's perhaps what you want to look for. There's lots of other things, but that's just, one example of how I see the data being used is more in a statistical format, in a much more in-depth statistical format than what has been done in the past.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you have data engineers on your team as well, David, or you have people with that background already?
We do. Yes,
Yeah.
we do. We have two different members of our team that are data engineers, and then I'm myself a Six Sigma black belt, so I've been playing around with statistics and whatnot pretty much my whole career.
Sounds like a great background to have. Um,
We'll see. It's so far it's proving to be useful, but the proof's in the pudding, right?
yeah. That seems like a good segue. I'm gonna just bring up. I grabbed a couple screen grabs of the EI analytic platform. Walk us through your approach to providing the information for your customers. How what are they looking for in terms of the access to it? What kind of information? My impression is you've been described as you're the vibration analyst best friend, because you're not trying to give them the answer necessarily. Correct me if my impression is wrong, but you're trying to give them the information they need to do their job more easily. Is that really the
That
sweet
is
spot for you?
That's the sweet spot for us. We're not here to analyze your data. We're here to help you analyze your data more efficiently and make action-oriented decisions based on that data. So that's what the whole ecosystem is designed around. So, the Wiser is our route-based analysis tool that pairs with, a cellular phone or a Windows tablet, and you can go out and collect your route-based data using that. And that data can reside on a local server, a cloud server, or a hybrid environment where the EI Analytic Cloud essentially processes the data, but then forwards the data, the raw data, the final data, to the customer's server. So the customer owns the data, which, I mean, for us as a company, that is one of the biggest things. I've been in this industry now 30 years. And I will say that in my 30 years, there's been many different organizations out there, and companies out there, but most of them have this philosophy of proprietary database and things like that. And we believe the data belongs to the customer. So
Right.
whether it's on their local server, because our system can be deployed locally in a hybrid scenario where they send the data to the cloud only for processing so that they can receive alarm notifications on their cell phone and things like that. Um, and then forward the raw data to the customer's server wherever they want it. And then there's the full cloud service, and through our EI Analytic platform, you can do all your routes and everything that you need to do, route compliance, all route-based analysis, route-based data collection. But then you can also have all of the phantom, wireless IoT analytics built into that same common dashboard, same common platform, same common views. And those views are customizable for the user. So, if they want to look, each user wants to look at data slightly differently, that's fine. Customize your view. Realistically, I think that the platform provides a pretty unique a pretty unique value to our customers, because of the fact that it can be all on the cloud. It can all be local. It can be hybrid. The data's theirs. They have access to all the raw data. We don't hide anything. The database schema is available for them to query. And if they want to export or import anything, they can do so through universal file format, CSV, ASCII, and I think a couple other formats. So realistically, EI Analytic was designed because we were sick of using proprietary everything when we were vibration people or reliability engineers. So the whole company is built on that open architecture philosophy. And even, from the EI analytic platform, if somebody wants to connect to it using our APIs, they can connect to it using the APIs to pull the data into their own visualization suite. We've got folks that do that too. So many different options make it a very flexible system to achieve the needs of 99% of customers, because one customer likes the cloud, one customer hates the cloud, one customer wants part of the cloud. By doing it all and making it open architecture, it really resonates well with all of our customers.
So as long as there are vibration analysts, you're going to have a loyal following of people that see this as a tool they can use, not something that's replacing them. It's not the smart system that might be smarter than they are.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's a smart system out there that currently exists that can fully replace a skilled, qualified, trained, and practicing vibration analyst. Until somebody brings one to a case study and the peer review paper with lots of data that supports very high accuracy, I'm just not sold on it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I quipped at a conference a couple of years ago, maybe we stop scaring these guys if we stop calling everything smart.
Yeah,
Let's call it helpful or
yeah,
useful. Or,
assistive.
yeah. Let's talk about technology a little bit. I'm an electronics guy, so I'm interested in as long as you know, I developed the MEMS for a living for a while, and the last year and a half, I've been spending a lot of times on batteries and battery life. So let's talk about that for a minute, because that is becoming, seems to me, front and center. When I took that CBM Connect poll a couple of years ago, battery life just didn't even register as one of the headlines. And I don't want to replace batteries. That wasn't the reason people were saying they didn't want to get into IoT. And I asked for a show of hands at a talk once, and one guy said, "Well, it's not my problem. Somebody else goes and replaces the battery. I don't have to worry about that." But
Yeah,
that changed the beginning of last year. I started getting calls about people who are concerned about battery life and looking for help with that. Um, excuse me. What's your excuse me? What's your comment, David, on the battery change issue as a cost of ownership? And Jason comment to that is the specking of battery life, and where do you think that's going? If you look at battery specs from all the vendors, I mean, they're all over the place. We know it's heavily conditional on a number of factors. It's a very complex space. I'd
it
love to see
is.
the conversation move forward in terms of just how do we give people the confidence that under some set of conditions, under some set of configuration variables, they can expect a certain amount of battery life, and we can spec it that way. I know
Yeah,
it's a
so
loaded question, but it's one I'll be asking everybody on this because it really has become front and center.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just share with you kind of our philosophy. Um, you can see my screen now, right?
I have to stop sharing, I think. Let me go ahead.
All right, and here we go. So you can see now, right, Ed?
Something's coming up. Okay. I see a dashboard.
All right, so if we look at batteries, well, batteries are a necessary evil at this point in time. Yeah, there's energy harvesting technology that's available. Some of it is pretty good, some of it is still in development. Most of it is extremely large in comparison to the sensor itself. So as a result, that makes it not very attractive to many customers. Having to put a large heat sink on a machine to then charge the battery, or solar panel, small solar array. And I mean, it's great that people are thinking toward that, and we are as well, but it comes down to, like, there has to be a very big step change in technology that will allow us to recharge these batteries using either native vibration from the machine being monitored, or other different things, without impacting negatively the signal that the sensor's sending. Because, when you add additional mass to the sensor, it dampens the signal. And so you have to think of these things. With us, our approach has been very simple. We go with a a pretty standard CR2477 battery, coin cell battery. It's the largest one available on the market. And then we give our customer the tool that we see here. How often do you want to send data? Every 4 hours? How often do you want to send your velocity RMS data? Every 60 seconds, 3600 seconds? Do you want to turn alarms on? Yes, you do. And how often do you want to check for an alarm condition? Every 30 seconds or every 5 minutes? How close are you to the gateway? And, what transfer power are you going to set up on that sensor in terms of the actual transfer power? So when we have these variables, and these aren't all the variables, but these are the most common ones, it gives us a very good indication of, okay, well, this is what we can expect. But please understand, there are other factors, like how many times that machine went into alarm. If you set your alarm too low and it continues to go into alarm and collect data, that's going to impact your battery. How often you collect manual collections, and then of course temperature and ambient conditions. So battery chemistry is not an exact science. And I say this after having a very long conversation with my cousin, who has a master's degree in chemical engineering and works for a battery manufacturer, and graduated from Clarkson University. So I mean, he's a really smart guy. And he said, a CR2477 isn't the same if it's a Panasonic or it's this other brand. The chemistries are all slightly different. And, as a
Manufacturing.
result,
Yep.
manufacturing process, quality,
Hmm.
there's so many variables. So we standardized on one specific battery. That's the one we recommend. It can be purchased anywhere in the world for about $6, from, a drugstore, a Walmart, Amazon, whatever.
Hmm.
And then we give the customer the tools to be able to make educated decisions. Like, if, hey, you know what? I only want data every twice a day, and I want to go out to 10 kilohertz, and I want to sense for an alarm every 3 minutes. I can get 5 years out of the battery in that scenario, and that does not include the number of alarms. So it gives them at least a good indication of what they can expect, where I don't think that that's the case with many others. I see many others putting a data sheet together, and we do too, where it says up to 65,000 recordings. Well, yes, up to 65,000 recordings, but here's the tool to help you determine how to get that.
Right. I like that. And you're right. It's very complicated technology. I got a job last year with a battery vendor. They wanted an independent IoT expert to write some white papers on their battery technology. And so I learned more about energy storage than I ever thought I wanted to know. And I'm amazed at how complicated it is, the
Yep,
chemistry and the energy density and all the factors that, um, self-discharge. How do you factor self-discharge
exactly.
into your so you've put some of the knobs that the user can turn. This is how we're going to configure it to be used. That's going to have an impact on the battery life. Completely fair. That's something they can do something about. How long it's sat on the shelf or how long it's in sleep mode and what the self-discharge will be. That's not something you want to ask the user to try to figure out. It's maybe something we don't even want to try to figure out, but you've got to derate the battery life estimates based on that. And that's not, at least so far, it doesn't appear to be a very easy thing to do.
No, it's not. And that's why we've taken the approach that we have, where, we know we have a very high level of confidence in the quality of the batteries that we provide,
Hmm.
because of extensive testing and field experience. And then we apply the use case to that battery, um, to then let the user determine what that prospective battery life will be.
Hmm. Hmm. I like it. I like that approach. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'm not sure when Kim is going to cut us off, but let me rapid fire a couple other questions by you. Your latest sensor design uses Bluetooth 5.0. I mean, Bluetooth has come a long way. It's not your father's audio connection anymore.
No.
What drove the decision for you guys to adopt Bluetooth? Many sensors do. Many vibration sensors do use Bluetooth to connect to a gateway. But what
Yeah.
drove that decision for you guys?
Well, BLE 5.0 is supports a number of different things. It supports a mesh networking topology, so that's very helpful. It also supports faster transfer rates and longer transfer distances. It supports different security protocols and security co-processing methods that are required for NIST and FIPS compliance. So there were a number of drivers, but those were the majority of them, and their energy consumption was another huge driver. Bluetooth 5.0, BLE 5.0 is truly a low energy transmission protocol in comparison to others like Zigbee and LoRaWAN and things like that. So is it perfect? Would I love to have more distance out of it? Yeah, I would. But with more distance comes a higher RF transmission consumption, and you have to balance those things. The good thing is that I think we've found the balance because our gateways can be configured as repeaters and a mesh networking topology. Combining those things and then the fact that the cost is reasonable. I mean, I've seen, and I'm sure you have too, Ed, some gateways for, IoT devices, I've seen price tags of $3,000 and $4,000. And, that to me seems excessive. So we designed our own gateway from the ground up to be able to, knock that IoT gateway cost down to about $600. So, that's the main reason why we chose BLE 5.0, though, was the power consumption, the mesh networking topology, and the ability to achieve the data transfer rates that we need.
You have a number of vendors as choices as well. It's not necessarily the case with some other protocols. So,
Yeah,
switch gears again, just a little bit to the business model. Um, CapEx versus OpEx.
sure.
What's been your approach, David, or what are you finding resonates with your customers in terms of you pointed out the $600 cost of the gateway. If you need more, you need more. That's a capital cost to deploying the system. How do you trade off to sort of IoT as a service uh, to a
Yeah.
subscription versus a CapEx expenditure?
So the cost of our products and the reliability associated with our products make it a pretty easy decision from a CapEx model. And even from an OpEx model, the cost is significantly lower than most any other of our competitors. So as a result of that, we don't really get into the OpEx side of the business unless the customer wants us to. And in which case they just buy the hardware and stuff using their OpEx budget rather than CapEx budget.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a unique difference, and that's the other thing. Airbus Instruments, could we be doing remote analysis? Yes, we could. We could become another remote analysis company. Do we want to? No, because it detracts us from innovating. That's not our business. We're going to leave the analysis to yes, we're analysis professionals, but we're more as a company. We're scientists, we're engineers, we're inventors. We innovate, we make great things happen, and we want to focus on that rather than focus on the OpEx model that we would then be analyzing data, because quite frankly, there's 100 other companies out there that are analyzing data, and many of our distributors are service companies. So it would just not be ethical to do that.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, this has been a great conversation, David. I hope the viewing audience at Mobius Connect will agree that this is a good first attempt please give your feedback to Mobius
Absolutely.
Connect via Kim. David, I want to thank you for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation. I could go for another hour myself, but talking to somebody like you. And but we are lining up other thought leaders in this space. We're going to continue this series. We'll have similar sessions like this. So any feedback you have, please forward that either to myself or to Kim at Mobius Connect. And we'll see you all next time. David, have a great day. Thanks for your
You
time.
too. Thanks, Ed.
All right. Bye
Bye.
now.
All right. Well, great. David and Ed, thank you so much for that great presentation. We really appreciate your time. Unfortunately, guys, we are running a little bit short on time. So that being said, while I'm wrapping up the webinar here, please feel free to go ahead and submit your questions in the question panel for David and Ed if you haven't already. And we'll be sure to share those with them, and they'll be in contact with you after the webinar is completed to make sure that you do get your questions answered. All right, so I'm going to go ahead here and just start wrapping things up for our session for today. That being said, as a thank you for attending WOW 11, we are super pleased to provide all of you for attending 50% off of your conference pass to the CBM and Reliability Connect live training conferences happening this year. We are coming to Mexico very soon in a few weeks, and then also to Australia in November. So if anybody's interested in attending, you can use code WOW50 and reserve your seat to take advantage of that discount. These events will include certification training opportunities, hands-on workshops, and case study sessions. And you can visit MobiusConnectConference.com to learn more about these live and in-person events. You'll also find the link to register in the follow-up email after this webinar is completed. All right. And then coming up next, we're not done with WOW 11 just yet. We have unearthed the full functionality of the All-Test Pro 7 electric motor PDM instrument presented by Simon Young, happening here shortly. So if you haven't already signed up and you would like to attend, please head on over or back to the attendee hub, and you'll be able to add that session to your agenda and jump on in when the session begins, or you can sign up for the recording of that session. All right, and you'll have full access to that in the on-demand library as well. And then just as a quick reminder, be on the lookout for an email from us containing the on-demand version of this session with access to the on-demand library and also your full certificate of attendance for tuning in to today's webinar with David and Ed. And if any of you guys are interested in engaging with other industry professionals, or if you'd like to participate on the industry's live feed and forum discussions, you can do so on Mobius Connect by visiting MobiusConnect.com to create your free profile. And you can also be sure to follow us on all major social media networks at Mobius Connect to stay up to date with the latest community happenings. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you can be sure to reach out to me or our team at info@mobiusconnect.com. But thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. We hope to see you at one of the remaining WOW 11 sessions. Please stay safe, and we will see you next time.